Welcome to our Bible study for November 9. You can tell there is a smoldering fire behind me. We had a tree cut down, and that is what is left of it on our burn pile. And I wanted to be here because today we actually come to two of the saddest chapters in the Old Testament, where Jerusalem becomes a smoking ruin, not much more than what you see back there behind me. And so it's sort of a visual lesson. There's a vulgar phrase that uses the F-bomb floating around. You've probably heard it. I'm going to clean it up a little bit. It's mess around and find out. And in spite of the vulgarity, if we use it in that other form, there really is some truth to that. When we mess around, when we persist in sin, we ultimately are going to pay the consequences for that sin. And we may get away with it for a long time, but eventually it happens. One of my mentors in preaching was a pastor named John Claypool, and he used to tell the story of the most tragic thing he ever encountered when he was a pastor. It was a fairly young man who had a long history of drinking problems and also anger management problems, and those two together are just so dangerous. And he did nothing to address either one of them. And one afternoon, in a fit of anger, he got mad at his wife about something he had been drinking. He had now exploded in anger. He jumped in his car, threw it in reverse, went flying out of the back of the driveway, and their young son was on a tricycle in the driveway, and he ran over the young son and killed him. The man lost in a moment his son. He lost his freedom. He was arrested for drunk driving and whatever the murder charge was there. He lost his wife. He lost absolutely everything in an instant, but it was an instant that was a long time coming. He didn't do what he needed to do to address those things. And Claypool talked about just the absolute despair that was in him and also in his wife. It's just a terrible tragedy. Well, really, that is what is going on in 2 Kings chapters 24 and 25. And so let me set the stage for the lesson. Jehoiakim is the 18-year-old king who comes to the throne. He does what is evil in the sight of the Lord, but it doesn't take him long. He's only there for 3 months. And then he surrenders to Nebuchadnezzar and the Babylonians, which actually is what Jeremiah was encouraging the people to do. You may remember in our last lesson with encouraging Zedekiah, who is going to follow Jehoiakim to surrender. But he surrenders, and he is taken prisoner. The temple is stripped of all of its treasures, but it is left remaining standing. And all of the talent, you might say, is taken to Babylon. This is how Daniel ends up in Babylon, because he is a talented young man, and so he's taken to Babylon. And what it says is only the poor people were left in Judah and in Jerusalem. And Nebuchadnezzar installs Jehoiakim's uncle, whose name is Mattaniah, as king. But Nebuchadnezzar changes his name to Zedekiah. The Babylonians like to change the names of the people they conquered as a way of really just kind of sticking it in their face. You're not who you used to be. Now you are ours. And so his name is changed to Zedekiah. You may or may not remember, Daniel has his name changed as well. His name is changed to Belteshazzar. But throughout the book of Daniel, he is referred to as Daniel because that is his real name and his real identity. But Zedekiah is a Babylonian name. He is to use that name to be reminded who he is, or who he now is. And it seems that Jerusalem is as low as it can possibly be. It has been sacked, although the walls are still standing and the temple is still standing. Both the finery from the temple and the finery of the people are now all gone. But Zedekiah messes around and finds out. He decides to rebel against Nebuchadnezzar in spite of the fact that he has no resources with which to do this. And so we're going to pick up the story in 2 Kings 24, beginning with the 18th verse. Zedekiah was 21 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 11 years. His mother's name was Hamutal, daughter of Jeremiah, and she was from Libnah. He did evil in the sight of the eyes of the Lord, just as Jehoiakim had done. It was because of the Lord's anger that all this happened to Jerusalem and Judah, and in the end he thrust them from his presence. Now Zedekiah rebelled against the king of Babylon. And that's the last verse in chapter 24. Zedekiah rebels against Nebuchadnezzar. He's messing around, and now he's going to find out. And so we get into the 25th chapter. So in the 9th year of Zedekiah's reign, on the 10th day of the 10th month, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, marched against Jerusalem with his whole army. He encamped outside the city and built siege works all around it. The city was kept under siege until the 11th year of King Zedekiah, 2 years of being under siege. By the 9th day of the 4th month, the famine in the city had become so severe that there was no food for the people to eat. Then the city wall was broken through, and the whole army fled at night through the gate between the two walls near the king's garden, though the Babylonians were surrounding the city. They fled toward the Arabah, but the Babylonian army pursued the king and overtook him in the plains of Jericho. All his soldiers were separated from him and scattered, and he was captured. He was taken to the king of Babylon at Riblah, where sentence was pronounced on him. They killed the sons of Zedekiah before his eyes. Then they put out his eyes and bound him with bronze shackles and took him to Babylon. On the 7th day of the 5th month, in the 19th year of Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, Nebuzaradan, commander of the imperial guard and official of the king of Babylon, came to Jerusalem. He set fire to the temple of the Lord, the royal palace, and all the houses of Jerusalem. Every important building he burned down. The whole Babylonian army, under the commander of the imperial guard, broke down the walls around Jerusalem. Nebuzaradan, the commander of the guard, carried into exile the people who remained in the city, along with the rest of the populace and those who had deserted to the king of Babylon. And there were only a very few people who were left. Well, verse 20 in some ways almost foreshadows the whole thing. It says that God just throws Judah and Jerusalem and the king out of his presence. Some of us have had that experience with our own parents where they say, just get out of my sight, I just don't want to see you right now. That kind of happens right there as well. And then we have this long 2-year siege where the people are starving to death. Zedekiah should have known better. How could he possibly go up against the king of Babylon, particularly given that most of his people were gone. He just had the poorest people who were left there. And it ends not only badly for Jerusalem, but for Zedekiah. Literally, the last thing that Zedekiah ever sees is his sons being slaughtered in front of him. And then they put out his eyes and bind him with shackles and take him to Babylon. Jerusalem is destroyed. Solomon's great cedar temple is burned to the ground. The walls of Jerusalem are torn down. And it is just a terrible, terrible tragedy. Maybe 2 of the worst chapters in the whole Bible. Now, what are we to make of all of this? What does this have to say to us? One thing I think we need to be very clear about is that this story really teaches us, the whole story of the ultimate demise of Judah and Jerusalem, that God hates sin, not so much because it is disgusting, although it is, but because it is harmful. And God doesn't want us to sin because it's going to hurt us. If we mess around, we're going to find out, but we don't have to find out. We can listen to God and obey God. And God's anger with us isn't so much that we disobey, although that's part of it, but the disobeying causes us to bring harm upon ourselves, and God does not want that to happen. Jerusalem and Judah and Israel before it didn't have to suffer, but they refused to listen. I mean, God's plans for them were, this is your land, and I'm going to make you a great nation, and all you have to do is worship me and serve me and do the things the way that I tell you to do them, because that is the way to live. And they wouldn't do it, and they suffered for it. Think about that young man in the story I told a few moments ago. His parents were no doubt heartbroken when they discovered all of this had happened, that their grandchild was gone, that their son was in jail, that his marriage was over, that his whole life was completely over. But they were likely angry with him as well. Probably they had said to him many, many times, you've got to get a handle on your anger. You've got to get a handle on your drinking. Do whatever it takes to get the help that you need. And he just wouldn't. Until then, it was too late. And he caused all of the suffering, both for himself and for his family. Another thing I think we can learn is remembering that Martin Luther King Jr. said that the universe ultimately bends towards justice, and that is true. And another way of saying that is that God's truth will come out eventually. Mess around and find out, but that's not going to be the end of the story. And we know that's not the end of the story of Judah or Jerusalem. It's not the end of the story for us either. So many out there, though, seem to just revel in greed and lust and in sin, and they seem to profit from it. Whether you're talking about the captains of industry or politicians or whatever, it seems like sometimes people never do suffer the consequences of their sin, but ultimately we know the wages of sin is death. And so it's not our job to go out and join them in whatever plunder they are taking, or join them in whatever lust or whatever things that they are doing, that kind of thing, but rather it is to challenge, but not challenge in a way that we would counter violence with violence or whatever. Instead, our job is not to sit in gleeful anticipation of watching their fall, and there's that word schadenfreude, where we enjoy seeing some enemy suffer what they had coming to them. But instead, it's really our job to be active witnesses of God's goodness and truth, and by the way that we conduct our lives, help them see that there is a better way. Way back when, in the very first church that I pastored, I was a volunteer fireman. And early on, when I joined the fire department, I wanted the rest of the guys to really like me. And here I am, the local pastor, and they all have their kind of preconceived notions, a prudish pastor and this kind of thing. They would try to watch their language around me, or when they used bad language around me, they would kind of make a big deal. Oh, preacher, sorry that we did that. And I really wanted them to accept me. And so my language started slipping. I started using some crude language as well, as a way of trying to kind of get in with them and help them see I'm just a regular guy, whatever. Rather than being a good witness, I kind of went over to their side, if you will. And one day I noticed that our chief, his name was Jesse Batts, and he was a lay minister with the Salvation Army. I realized that he didn't use bad language, and he didn't use that coarse language, and he didn't do the things the other firemen did in order to try to make them respect him or like him or whatever. He was just a wonderful witness, a quiet witness. He didn't complain to them when they cussed or whatever. He didn't challenge them when they talked about going out and getting drunk or whatever it was. But he was just a quiet witness. And one of the things I remember he just loved to say, just really quietly, he would sometimes say, I'm royalty. I'm a child of the king. And I realized one day that how much those men respected and liked him. I mean, he was the chief, and the chief is the one that you have to put your life in his hands. If he says go into a burning building, he's already assessed and decided that it is safe enough to go in there to try to put out the fire. It's not about it all come collapsing down or whatever. And they did that. They trusted him and they liked him, and he didn't have to resort to becoming like them. And that was a powerful lesson for me. And I cleaned up my language, and I repented of the things that I was doing, and I tried to be a positive witness rather than falling into that. I think that's part of what this lesson is calling us to do as well. But not only to be a positive witness in terms of being a good people, but finding ways to counter evil in ways that God would have us to do that. And Paul tells us exactly how to do that in Romans, the 12th chapter. And so I want to end with that today. I'm going to begin with the 17th verse. Paul tells us, do not repay anyone evil for evil. Be careful to do what is right in the eyes of everyone. Those other firemen needed to see me do what was right, not what was wrong. If it is possible, as so far as it depends upon you, live at peace with everyone. Do not take revenge, my dear friends, but leave room for God's wrath. For it is written, it is mine to avenge, I will repay, says the Lord. So this is saying that God's going to take his revenge. And in a sense, it's not so much that God takes revenge, but God will allow people to suffer the consequences from their sin. But the ultimate revenge of God is this. It follows up. On the contrary, says Paul, if your enemy is hungry, feed him. If he is thirsty, give him something to drink. In doing this, you will heap burning coals on his head. How do we take revenge on our enemies? We offer them goodness and grace. And then Paul concludes the chapter, do not overcome evil by evil, but overcome evil with good. And so we are called to overcome evil with good. I saw a meme the other day that was kind of funny. It said, where are we going and why am I in this handbasket? And sometimes it feels like we're in a handbasket headed to hell. But what we are called to do here is to not overcome evil with evil, but to overcome evil with good. To live our lives as living witnesses of the goodness and the grace of God. And if we do that, we are promised, even though sometimes it doesn't seem so, we will change people. We will ultimately change the world. And as my friend Jesse Batt said, we are royalty, children of the King. And so let us act like it. Amen.